The dust settled around Helena Everett's worn boots as she watched another prospective customer walk past her makeshift stand without so much as a glance. And she wondered if today would be the day she finally gave up on her dream of becoming a real artist. The year was 1883, and Dalhart, Texas, was nothing more than a collection of weathered buildings struggling against the relentless prairie wind. Helena had arrived 3 months ago with $40 sewn into her petticoat and a leather satchel full of charcoal pencils. Hoping the growing cattle town would offer opportunities, her crowded Boston neighborhood never could. She had been wrong about many things, but mostly about how much people valued art when they were worried about cattle prices and water rights. She sat on a wooden crate behind a plank balanced on 2 barrels, her hand-painted sign propped against the dusty street. Portraits, 5 cents, it declared in careful lettering, though she had not sold a single sketch in 4 days. The coins in her pocket had dwindled to 7 pennies and a bent nickel, barely enough for another night at the boarding house where Mrs. Patterson was already giving her meaningful looks about overdue rent. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Helena arranged her pencils for the dozenth time, trying to look professional and hopeful even as her stomach growled. She had eaten nothing but a heel of bread that morning, saving her meager resources for absolute necessities. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though strands had escaped to curl damply against her neck in the oppressive heat. At 22, she had imagined herself established by now, maybe teaching art to wealthy children or selling paintings to cultured collectors. Instead, she was hawking quick sketches to ranchers who could barely raid, most of whom seemed to think art was a frivolous waste of money. A group of cowboys thundered past on horseback, kicking up clouds of dust that made Helena cough and shield her eyes. When the air cleared, she found herself looking directly at a man who had stopped his horse just a few feet from her stand. He sat tall in the saddle, his frame lean and muscular beneath a dust-covered shirt. His hat shaded most of his face, but she could see a strong jaw and the hint of stubble. What caught her attention most were his hands on the reins, long-fingered and surprisingly elegant for a working cowboy. "You draw people." His voice was low and smooth, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent years under the Texas sky. Helena straightened immediately, trying not to seem too eager. "Yes, sir. Portraits 5 cents. I can have it done in 20 minutes. He dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be well over 6 feet tall. As he approached her stand, she got her first clear look at his face. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His features were handsome in a weathered, practical way, the kind of face that had seen hard work and long days, but had not lost its capacity for expression. There was something thoughtful in the way he studied her displayed samples, actual consideration rather than the dismissive glances she usually received. "You did these." He pointed to the 3 portraits she had pinned up as examples, sketches she had done of fellow boarding house residents who had sat for her in exchange for helping with their mending. "Yes, sir. Those took about 30 minutes each because I added shading, but for 5 cents I do a simpler version. Still a good likeness, just less detail." He was quiet for a long moment, still examining her work. Helena held her breath, afraid to hope. Then he looked directly at her, and she was struck by the intelligence in those gray eyes. "These are real good," he said simply. "Better than anything I have seen in these parts. Better than most things I have seen anywhere." Heat rushed to Helena's cheeks. "Thank you. I have been drawing since I was a child. It shows." He pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket. "How much for one with all the shading and detail?" "Take however long you need to do it right." Helena's heart jumped. 30 minutes of work, I would charge 15 cents. I will give you $1 if you do it proper. Take an hour if you need. 2 hours. Whatever it takes to make it the best you can do. He placed a silver dollar on her plank table, the metallic sound ringing out like a bell. She stared at the coin, more money than she had seen in weeks. Sir, that is too much. I cannot charge that for a single portrait. You are charging too little, if anything. He settled onto the empty crate she kept for customers. $1 is nothing for real talent. Now, do I just sit here, or do you need me to do something particular? Helena's hands trembled slightly as she picked up her best pencil and opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. Just sit naturally. You can talk if you want, or look around. I just need you to stay generally in that position. As she began the initial outline, she tried to keep her hands steady. This was her chance to prove herself, to show what she could really do when given the time and compensation to do it right. She studied his face carefully, noting the strong bone structure, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken once, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. "What brings you to Dalhart?" he asked after a few minutes of silence. Helena kept her eyes on her work, using quick, confident strokes to capture the basic proportions. "I needed a fresh start. Boston was too crowded, too expensive. I thought a growing town might need an artist. Boston, that is a long way to travel alone. My parents died 2 years ago. Fever took them within a week of each other. I had no siblings, no husband, nothing tying me to Massachusetts. So I decided to go somewhere I might actually afford to live while building my career." She glanced up at him. "Turns out people do not much value portraits when they are worried about cattle and drought. People do not value most things properly until someone shows them why they should." He shifted slightly, then caught himself. "Sorry, should I stay still? Small movements are fine. I have the basic structure now." She began adding details, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of observing and translating what she saw onto paper. His face was interesting to draw, full of character. There were smile lines around his eyes despite his serious expression, suggesting he laughed more than he frowned. "What about you? Are you from Dalhart?" "Passing through mostly. I work for the Triple L Ranch about 15 miles west of here. We brought cattle to the stockyards today." He paused. "Name is Yates Lawson, by the way. Seems rude not to introduce myself when you are staring at me so intently." She felt herself blush again. "Helena Everett, and I apologize for staring. Occupational hazard. No offense taken. It is interesting being on this side of it. I have never had my portrait done." "Never," she looked up surprised. "Never had the money or the occasion, but I saw you sitting here and something made me stop." His gray eyes met hers. Maybe it was the sign. Maybe it was seeing someone else struggling to make people appreciate something valuable. Or maybe I just liked the determined look on your face. Helena focused back on her sketch, her heart beating faster. "The determined look of desperation, you mean?" "The determined look of someone who is not going to quit, even when things are hard." His voice was gentle but firm. "There is a difference." They fell into a comfortable silence as she worked. Helena added shading carefully, using the side of her pencil to create depth and dimension. She paid special attention to his eyes, trying to capture that quality of thoughtful observation she had noticed. This was the kind of portrait she had dreamed of doing, taking the time to really see her subject and translate not just their features but something of their character onto the page. "How long have you been drawing?" Yates asked after a while. "Since I was 6 or 7. My mother was a seamstress and she would let me sketch her clients while they stood for fittings. She said it kept me quiet and out of trouble." Helena smiled at the memory. "By the time I was 12, I was doing proper portraits. I studied at the Women's Educational and Industrial Union in Boston, took classes whenever I could afford them. Sounds like you worked hard for this. Art was the only thing I was ever good at. Reading, arithmetic, music, they all defeated me. But drawing made sense. I could see something and understand it through putting it on paper. She added the final touches to his collar, then sat back to evaluate her work. There, what do you think? Yates stood and came around to look at the sketch. His expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, recognition, something she could not quite name. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "That is remarkable. You made me look better than I am. I drew what I saw." Helena studied the portrait critically. It was some of her best work, she had to admit. She had captured not just his features but something essential about him, that combination of strength and gentleness. The weathering of outdoor work contrasted with an inner thoughtfulness. "Do you have more examples of your work? Things you have done when you had the time to do them right?" "A few, back at my room. Mostly I have been doing quick sketches because that is all people will pay for." She carefully tore the portrait from her sketchbook. "Would you like me to put this in some paper to protect it? Actually, I want to talk to you about something." Yates pulled another coin from his wallet, this time a $5 gold piece. "How much would you charge to spend the next few days doing nothing but your best work?" Real portraits, the kind that take hours, not minutes. Helena stared at the gold coin gleaming in his palm. $5 was more than she made in a good month. "I do not understand. Portraits of who? You already have yours. Let me explain something. The owner of the Triple L, Mr. Garrett, his wife has been wanting to commission portraits of their 3 daughters. She has been writing to artists in Dallas and San Antonio, but none of them want to travel this far for a commission. If I could show them what you can do, prove you are as good as any city artist, they would pay well. Mrs. Garrett does not care about money when it comes to her girls. You would do that for me. But you do not even know if I am truly skilled enough." Yates pointed at the portrait in her hands. "This tells me everything I need to know. You have real talent, Helena, the kind that should not be wasted on 5-cent sketches in the dust." He pressed the gold coin into her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Take this for your time. Spend tomorrow doing 3 or 4 of your absolute best portraits. Use whoever you can convince to sit for you. I do not care who. Just show what you can really do when you are not rushing. I will come back day after tomorrow and bring those samples to Mrs. Garrett." "But what if she does not like them? What if she thinks I am not good enough?" Helena heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it, but the money in her hand felt like a lifeline, and she was terrified of false hope. "Then I will buy those portraits myself, and you will have earned $5 honestly for your work. But I think she will like them. I think she will hire you on the spot." He picked up his original portrait, looking at it again with that expression she still could not read. "Do you have a frame for this? I can get one. Mr. Patterson at the boarding house does woodwork. He could make something simple." "Nothing simple. Tell him I will pay for a proper frame, something that does this justice." Yates met her eyes again. "Your work deserves to be displayed right, not hidden away or tacked to a wall." Helena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger, this unexpected benefactor who was treating her art with more respect than anyone had in months. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me." "Because I know what it is like to be good at something and have nobody notice. I know what it is like to work hard and feel invisible." He rolled the portrait carefully. "And because the world has enough people tearing each other down. Figured I would try building someone up for a change." Before she could respond, he had mounted his horse in one smooth motion. Looking down at her from the saddle, he touched the brim of his hat. "Day after tomorrow, Miss Everett. Have those samples ready." Helena watched him ride away, dust rising in his wake, the gold coin heavy in her hand and heavier still with possibility. For the first time since arriving in Dalhart, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. She packed up her stand quickly, her mind already racing with possibilities. The boarding house was a 10-minute walk through the dusty streets, past the general store and the saloon, and the small church that served the scattered community. Mrs. Patterson was sweeping the front steps when Helena arrived, her round face creased with its usual expression of mild disapproval. "You are early," the older woman noted. "Did not sell anything again. Actually, I have a commission." Helena held up the gold coin, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. "A real one." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. $5 for a drawing." "For several drawings, if this works out the way I hope." Helena was already planning her next steps. "Is your husband home? I need to ask about his woodworking." Within an hour, Helena had secured promises from 3 fellow boarders to sit for portraits the next day. Mrs. Patterson herself agreed to be one subject, her suspicion of Helena's artistic pursuits overcome by the flattery of being asked. A young ranch hand named Thomas, who lived in the room next to Helena's, agreed to sit for 2 hours in exchange for a copy of his portrait to send to his mother in Missouri. And the boarding house cook, an older black woman named Ruth, who had worked her way to Freedom and then to Dalhart, agreed to sit during her afternoon break from kitchen duties. That night, Helena laid out her supplies with the care of a surgeon preparing instruments. She had good pencils, real artist's charcoal, even a few precious sticks of colored chalk she had been hoarding for a special occasion. This was that occasion. This was her chance. She barely slept, her mind too full of compositions and light angles and the memory of gray eyes looking at her with unexpected respect. The next day dawned clear and hot, like most days in the Texas Panhandle. Helena set up her working space in the boarding house's small parlor where the light came in clear through the eastern window in the morning. Mrs. Patterson sat first, arranging herself stiffly in the good chair. "Relax," Helena urged gently. "Think of something pleasant. I want to capture you as you really are, not posing." "I am always this stiff," Mrs. Patterson grumbled, but a small smile tugged at her lips. "Gets worse every year. Then tell me about when you were young. What brought you to Texas?" As Mrs. Patterson began talking about her journey from Ohio as a young bride, her expression softened and animated. Helena sketched quickly, capturing that transformation, the way memory brought light to the older woman's face. This was what she loved about portrait work, finding that moment when her subject's guard dropped and their essential self showed through. The portrait took 90 minutes, and when Helena showed it to Mrs. Patterson, the older woman went quiet for a long moment. "Is that really how you see me?" she asked finally, her voice thick. "It is how you are," Helena replied simply. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "My Henry should see this. He forgets sometimes that I was young once, that I had dreams too." She touched the edge of the paper with a careful finger. "This is real art, Miss Everett. Not just a picture, but a story." Thomas sat for her after lunch, gangly and sunburned in his clean shirt. He was only 19, barely older than a boy, homesick for Missouri and family. Helena drew him with the beginning of a smile, the way he looked when he talked about his mother's cooking and his little sister's letters. She captured the youth in his face, but also the growing strength, the transformation from boy to man that the frontier demanded. Ruth's portrait was the most challenging and the most rewarding. The older woman had a face marked by years of hardship, but also a quiet dignity that demanded respect. Helena spent 2 full hours on this one, using her precious colored chalks to capture the richness of Ruth's dark skin, the silver threads in her hair, the wisdom in her eyes. "You made me look beautiful," Ruth said when she saw the finished work, wonder in her voice. "You are beautiful," Helena replied. "I just put on paper what was already there." That evening, Helena laid out all 3 portraits on her bed and studied them critically. They were good, better than good. They were the kind of work she had known she was capable of but rarely had the chance or resources to produce. Each portrait captured not just a face but a person, a story, a life. This was what art could be when given time and respect. She barely slept again that night, anxiety and hope warring in her chest. Yates arrived just after noon the next day, riding up to the boarding house on the same dark horse. Helena was waiting on the porch, the 3 portraits carefully wrapped in clean cloth. "Miss Everett." He dismounted and climbed the steps to join her. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I will ever be." She handed him the bundle, her heart hammering. "I did my best." Yates unwrapped the portraits one by one, taking his time with each. His expression remained neutral as he studied Mrs. Patterson, then Thomas, then Ruth. The silence stretched so long that Helena felt panic rising in her throat. They were not good enough. She had fooled herself into thinking she had real talent when she was just competent at best. Then Yates looked up at her, and his eyes were shining. "Helena, these are extraordinary, this one especially." He indicated Ruth's portrait. "The way you captured the light on her skin, the expression in her eyes. I have seen paintings in museums that were not this good." "You have been to museums?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A shadow crossed his face. "I have not always been a ranch hand, but that is a story for another time." He carefully rewrapped the portraits. "I am taking these to Mrs. Garrett now. The Triple L is about 2 hours' ride from here. I should be back before sunset." "Do you want to come with me, or would you rather wait here?" Helena's practical nature warred with her desire to see this through. "I should come. If she wants to meet me, I should be there. Can you ride?" "I can sit a horse well enough." Yates grinned, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face. "Good enough for me. Let me arrange a horse from the stable." An hour later, they were riding west across the open prairie. Helena had changed into her most practical dress and borrowed a wide-brimmed hat from Mrs. Patterson. She was not an elegant rider, but she had learned the basics as a child from an uncle who kept horses, and it came back to her now. Yates rode beside her, matching his pace to hers, the wrapped portraits secured carefully in his saddlebag. For a while they traveled in comfortable silence, the only sounds the horses' hooves and the endless wind across the grassland. "You said you have not always been a ranch hand," Helena ventured finally. "What did you do before?" Yates was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, "I was studying to be a lawyer, in Virginia before the war, but that was over almost 20 years ago." "You would have been just a child." "I was 7 when it ended, old enough to remember everything burning." His voice was carefully neutral. "My father was a lawyer, a good one. He taught me to read using his law books, started training me to follow in his profession. But after the war, everything fell apart. We lost everything. He died when I was 15, my mother a year later. I have been working cattle ranches ever since." Helena heard the pain beneath the words, the life unlived and dreams deferred. "Do you ever think about going back to it, to law?" "Sometimes. But I am 30 now, and I have been working cattle for half my life. I do not know if I have the learning anymore or the money for proper education." He glanced at her. "That is why I recognized something in you, sitting there with your sign. You have that look of someone fighting for a dream that everybody else says is foolish." "Is it foolish? To think I can make a living as an artist out here?" "I do not think so. I think you just need the right opportunity." He pointed ahead. "Look, you can see the ranch buildings now." The Triple L spread out before them, larger and more prosperous than Helena had expected. Several buildings clustered around a main ranch house, a substantial two-story structure with a wide porch. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see ranch hands working in the distance. Yates led her to the main house and helped her dismount. A Mexican woman answered the door at his knock, her expression friendly but curious when she saw Helena. "Yates, what brings you here? And who is your guest?" "Maria, is Mrs. Garrett home? I have something she will want to see." "She is in the parlor with the girls. Come in, come in." Helena followed Yates into a surprisingly refined interior. The furniture was fine quality, the floors polished wood. Paintings hung on the walls, landscapes mostly, though Helena noted they were only moderately skilled reproductions. Mrs. Garrett rose from her chair when they entered the parlor. She was an elegant woman in her middle 40s, dressed in a style that would not have been out of place in a city drawing room. Three girls ranged in age from perhaps 8 to 15 were scattered around the room, reading and doing needlework. "Mr. Lawson." Mrs. Garrett's surprise was evident. "I did not expect to see you today." "Forgive the intrusion, Mrs. Garrett, but I think I have found a solution to your difficulty about the portraits." Yates gestured to Helena. "This is Miss Helena Everett, an artist recently arrived from Boston. I asked her to prepare some samples of her work for your consideration." Mrs. Garrett's eyebrows rose as she looked Helena over, taking in her dusty traveling dress and wind-blown hair. Helena felt herself being evaluated and found wanting. But then Yates unwrapped the portraits, and Mrs. Garrett's expression changed entirely. She moved closer, studying each one with complete focus. She lifted Ruth's portrait to the light, examining the detail work. "You did these?" she asked Helena directly. "Yes, madam, yesterday and the day before. The colored chalkwork here is exceptional. And the way you have captured expression and character, not just features." Mrs. Garrett looked at her three daughters. "Girls, come see this. This is real artistry." The three girls crowded around, their reactions ranging from studied indifference from the eldest to genuine excitement from the youngest. "Could you do this with us, Mama?" the youngest asked. "Could she make us look this pretty? Much prettier, I would think." Mrs. Garrett turned back to Helena. "Miss Everett, I have been trying for months to arrange for quality portraits of my daughters. Every artist I have contacted has either demanded exorbitant fees for traveling this far, or their samples have been mediocre at best. Your work is neither mediocre nor overpriced, I suspect. I charge based on time and materials, madam. For portraits of this detail with the colored chalks, I would ask $3 each. That includes time for sittings, the materials, and a basic frame if you wish." $3, Mrs. Garrett looked almost offended. "Miss Everett, I was prepared to pay $25 per portrait to the last artist I contacted, and his samples were half as good as these. I will give you $10 for each daughter, plus room and board while you work, plus an additional $20 when you finish all three if I am satisfied with the results." Helena's head spun trying to calculate. $50 total, plus room and board. That was more than she had made in the last 6 months combined. "Madam, that is extraordinarily generous. That is what real talent is worth. When can you start?" "Whenever you wish, madam." "Tomorrow, then. Maria will prepare a room for you. Plan to stay at least a week, perhaps 2. I want you to take your time, do the work properly." Mrs. Garrett smiled warmly. "And please, call me Catherine when we are not being formal." The next hour passed in a blur of arrangements. Helena would return to town to collect her supplies and belongings, then take up residence at the Triple L for the duration of the commission. Yates volunteered to escort her back and forth, which Catherine accepted with a knowing look that made Helena blush. As they rode back toward Dalhart in the golden light of late afternoon, Helena felt like she was floating. Everything had changed in 3 days. 3 days ago she was down to her last pennies, sleeping in a boarding house room she could barely afford. Now she had a commission that would let her live comfortably for months while she built her reputation. "Thank you," she said to Yates, the words feeling inadequate for what he had done. "You changed my life. You did not have to do any of this." "I did not change anything. I just helped people see what was already there." He looked at her, the setting sun turning his gray eyes almost gold. "You did the hard part. You kept working, kept believing in yourself even when nobody else did. All I did was point in the right direction. Still, I will never forget this. What you have done for me." They rode in silence for a while, comfortable with each other in a way that seemed to have developed remarkably quickly. Helena found herself studying his profile when she thought he was not looking, noting the way the fading light caught in his dark hair, the strong line of his jaw. "Can I ask you something?" Yates said eventually. "Of course. That portrait you did of me, the first one. How did you decide what to draw? I mean, you looked at me and saw something, and then you put that on paper. How does that work?" Helena considered the question. "I look for what makes someone themselves. With you, it was the contradiction between your work and your words. You have the hands and body of someone who works cattle, but you speak like an educated man. You have seen hard times, I can see it in your face, but you have not let it make you hard. So I tried to capture that, the gentleman beneath the cowboy." Yates was quiet for a long moment. "No one has ever looked at me that carefully before. That is what art is, I think. Really seeing people." When they reached Dalhart, Yates helped her down from her horse. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary, and Helena felt heat rise to her face. "I will come by tomorrow morning to help you transport your things to the ranch," he said. "You do not have to do that. You have already done so much. I want to." His gray eyes held hers. "Besides, those art supplies look heavy." Helena smiled. "They are, I accept gratefully." That night, she packed her belongings with trembling hands, still half afraid this was all a dream. She paid Mrs. Patterson the back rent she owed plus extra for the woman's kindness, which made the older woman tear up unexpectedly. "You come back and visit when your commission is done, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "I want to hear all about it, I promise." Ruth hugged her tightly. "You deserve this, child. You worked for it." Morning came bright and clear. Yates arrived as promised, leading a gentle mare for Helena and a pack horse for her supplies. The ride to the Triple L felt different this time, charged with possibility. They talked more freely now, sharing stories of their pasts, finding unexpected common ground. "My mother used to say that talent without opportunity is like water in a sealed bottle," Yates told her. "All the potential in the world, but no way to pour it out and use it. She was talking about my father's law practice after the war, but I think it applies to lots of things. My mother said something similar. She told me that art was a gift, but making art was hard work, and I should never confuse the two." Helena adjusted her seat on the mare. "I think she was trying to prepare me for how difficult this life would be." "Do you think she would be proud of you? Of what you are doing?" "I hope so. She died before I had a chance to really prove myself. Sometimes I draw because I want to show her that I listened, that I took her seriously." Helena looked out at the vast prairie stretching in every direction. "What about you? What would your father think of you working cattle instead of practicing law?" "Disappointed, probably. But he would understand. Sometimes survival has to come before dreams." Yates shifted in his saddle. "Maybe not forever, though. Maybe eventually you get a chance to chase what you really want." There was something in his tone that made Helena look at him more closely. "Are you thinking about going back to law?" "I do not know. It has been so long. But talking to you, seeing you fight for your art, it makes me wonder if maybe I gave up too easily." He smiled slightly. "See, you are already changing lives, and you have only been in Texas a few months." At the ranch, Maria showed Helena to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, with good light from a large window and a sturdy table she could use for her work. The three Garrett daughters, Sarah, Elizabeth, and young Margaret, were eager and curious, crowding into her room to watch her unpack her supplies. "Will it hurt when you draw us?" Margaret asked, her eyes wide. Helena laughed. "Not at all. You just have to sit still for a while. Can you do that?" "I can sit very still," Margaret assured her seriously. "I am 8.5. Over the next few days, Helena fell into a pleasant routine. She would spend mornings with whichever daughter was sitting for her, working while the light was best. Afternoons, she spent refining details and mixing chalks to get exact color matches. Evenings, she took her meals with the Garrett family, finding them to be educated and kind people who treated her as a guest rather than hired help. Yates came by the ranch every few days, ostensibly to check on his framed portrait, which Mr. Garrett's carpenter was crafting from fine wood. But Helena noticed he always seemed to find reasons to seek her out, to ask how the work was progressing, to bring her small gifts like fresh pencils from the general store or a new sketchbook he claimed he found lying around. "You do not have to keep bringing me things," she told him one evening as they walked together near the ranch house, the Texas sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "I know, I want to." He was quiet for a moment. "Truth is, I look forward to seeing you, to hearing about your day, your work. It reminds me there are things in the world beyond cattle and dust." Helena's heart beat faster. "I look forward to seeing you too, more than I probably should." "Why should not you?" "Because I am trying to build a career. I cannot afford distractions, even pleasant ones." But even as she said it, she knew it was a weak protest. Yates had become more than a distraction. She found herself thinking about him when she should be focusing on her portraits, wondering what he was doing, when she would see him next. "What if I am not a distraction? What if I am part of the life you are building?" His voice was gentle but intent. Helena stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading light, his eyes were very gray, very serious. "Yates, I barely know you, you barely know me. I know you are brave enough to travel 1,000 miles alone to chase a dream. I know you are talented enough to turn charcoal and paper into something that makes people see themselves differently. I know you have kindness in you, the way you are patient with the girls, the way you talk to Ruth and Mrs. Patterson like they mattered." He took a step closer. "And I know that when I am with you, I feel like maybe my dreams are not as dead as I thought they were." "What are you saying?" Helena's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I am saying I have been half alive for years, just going through the motions, and then you showed up with your pencils and your determination and woke something up in me. I am saying I would like a chance to know you better, properly. To see if this feeling I have is as real as it seems." Helena's breath caught. She knew she should be cautious. She had only known him 2 weeks, but there was something about Yates that felt right, like recognition rather than discovery. "I would like that too. But I need to focus on my work right now. This commission could make my reputation. Then I will wait. I am good at waiting." He smiled. "I have been waiting 30 years to feel like this. I can be patient a little longer." The next week passed in a blur of focused work. Helena poured herself into the portraits, determined to create something exceptional. Sarah, the eldest at 15, was serious and literary, so Helena drew her with a book, capturing the intelligence in her dark eyes. Elizabeth, 13 and horse-mad, was portrayed with her favorite mare visible through a window behind her, the connection between girl and animal evident in her expression. Young Margaret was the most challenging, fidgety, and easily bored, but Helena finally captured her mid-laugh, alive with joy and mischief. When all 3 portraits were complete, Catherine Garrett wept. "They are perfect, better than I imagined. You have given me my daughters exactly as they are, exactly how I want to remember them always." True to her word, Catherine paid the full $50, plus an additional 10 as a bonus. "I want you to know you are welcome to stay here as long as you like while you establish yourself. We have the room, and I suspect my husband will want his portrait done, and mine and half the neighboring ranches once they see what you can do." It was more than Helena had dared hope. A patron, a base of operations, a steady stream of potential commissions. She accepted gratefully, already planning how to build on this success. Yates's framed portrait was delivered a few days later, the carpenter having created a beautiful dark wood frame with subtle carved details. When Yates saw it hung on the wall of the ranch house parlor, he stood motionless for a long moment. "I never thought I would see myself like that," he said finally. "Like someone worth framing and hanging on a wall." "You are worth more than you think," Helena told him. "You just needed someone to show you." That evening, Yates asked if she would take a ride with him. They rode out onto the prairie as the sun began to set, stopping at a small creek where cottonwood trees provided shade, and the sound of running water broke the endless prairie silence. "I have been thinking about what you said," Yates began as they sat on the creek bank, "about needing to focus on your career, about not having time for distractions." Helena's heart sank. "Yates, I did not mean, let me finish." He turned to face her fully. "You were right to say it. You have worked too hard to let anything derail you now, but I want you to know that I am not looking to derail you. I want to support you, help you build what you are trying to build." "How? You work cattle. I do portraits. Those are not exactly compatible careers." "Maybe not as they are now. But I have been saving my wages for years, Helena. I have nearly $800 put away. I was saving it for something important, though I did not know what. Now I think I do." He took a breath. "I want to go back to school, finish my legal education. There are schools in Dallas, even in Austin. It would take me 3, maybe 4 years, but at the end I could practice law, build something real." Helena stared at him. "Yates, that is wonderful. You should absolutely do that. I am telling you because I want you to know I am serious about building a future, not just drifting, and I want you to be part of that future if you are willing." His gray eyes held hers intently. "I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that what I feel for you is not going to change, whether I see you every day or once a month. So I am asking if you would be willing to try, to see where this goes while we are both building our dreams." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this thoughtful, damaged, beautiful man, was offering her exactly what she had not known she needed: partnership without possession, support without sacrifice. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I am willing to try." Yates smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face, and leaned forward to kiss her. It was gentle and careful, a question as much as a statement. Helena answered by kissing him back, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "We should probably head back before they send a search party," Yates said, his voice rough with emotion. "Probably." But neither of them moved for a long moment, content to sit beside the creek in the gathering darkness. The next months unfolded with a rhythm that felt both exciting and sustainable. Helena took commission after commission, her reputation spreading through word of mouth. Catherine Garrett became not just a patron but a friend, introducing Helena to other wealthy ranch families, writing letters of recommendation, displaying Helena's work prominently when visitors came. Yates began making arrangements to attend law school in Austin, corresponding with the university, arranging his finances, preparing to leave the Triple L. They saw each other when they could, stolen evenings and weekend rides, slowly learning each other's histories and hopes. "Tell me about Boston," Yates said one evening as they sat on the ranch house porch, watching heat lightning flicker on the horizon. "What was it like growing up there? Crowded? Loud? I lived in a tenement near the waterfront with my parents. My father worked the docks when he could get work, which was not always. My mother took in sewing and mending." Helena smiled at the memories. "I used to draw the ships in the harbor, trying to capture how they looked against the sky. My teachers said I should pursue art seriously, but there was never money for proper training. But you found a way anyway. I found a way to learn what I could. Free lectures, library books, watching other artists work in the public gardens." She leaned against his shoulder. "I was always on the outside looking in, seeing what I wanted but not quite able to reach it. That is why I left after my parents died. I thought maybe somewhere else, somewhere new, I could actually build what I wanted instead of just dreaming about it." "And have you built what you wanted?" Helena considered. "I am building it. It is not finished yet, but yes, I think I am actually doing it." She looked up at him. "What about you? Are you scared about going back to school?" "Terrified," Yates admitted. "I am 30 years old. Most of the other students will be 18, 19. I have been working cattle for so long I am not sure I remember how to study properly." "You will remember. And you will be better than the younger students because you know why you are there, what it costs, what it is worth." Helena took his hand. "I believe in you, the same way you believed in me. We are quite a pair, are not we? Two people who refuse to give up on impossible dreams. Maybe they were not impossible. Maybe they just needed the right time." In October, Yates left for Austin. The parting was harder than Helena had expected, even though they had been preparing for it. They stood beside the stagecoach trying to find words for what they were feeling. "I will write every week," Yates promised, "and I will come back whenever I can, holidays and breaks. Focus on your studies, I will still be here." Helena tried to smile. "I am not going anywhere. 4 years. Maybe less if I can manage a heavier course load." He pulled her close, not caring who saw. "I am coming back, Helena. To you, to this life we are building. This is not goodbye. I know, it is just hard. The best things usually are." Their kiss was long and desperate and full of promise. Then Yates climbed into the stagecoach and was gone, dust rising in the wake of the departing wheels. Helena threw herself into her work with renewed intensity. She took every commission offered, traveled to neighboring towns to do portraits, even began teaching drawing classes to the daughters of wealthy families. Catherine Garrett became a true friend and mentor, helping Helena navigate the social complexities of Texas ranch society, introducing her to influential people, ensuring she was treated as an artist rather than a servant. The letters from Yates arrived like clockwork, every Monday without fail. He wrote about his classes, his professors, the younger students who looked at him like a curiosity. He wrote about late nights studying, early mornings in the law library, the slow process of rebuilding knowledge he had lost. And he wrote about missing her, about counting the days until Christmas break when he could return. Helena wrote back about her commissions, her students, the slow accumulation of both reputation and savings. She wrote about the portrait she was working on of a rancher's wife, the challenges of capturing aging beauty. She wrote about Catherine's friendship and Maria's cooking, and the way the prairie looked in autumn light. And she wrote about missing him, about the empty space he had left, about how her success felt incomplete without him there to share it. When Yates returned for Christmas, he looked different. Still recognizably himself, but straighter somehow, more confident. The gentleman and the cowboy had merged into something new. "You look good," Helena told him as they embraced at the stage-coach station. "You look beautiful." He pulled back to study her face. "Really beautiful. Success agrees with you." They spent the week together, relearning each other, discovering that the connection between them had not faded but deepened. On Christmas Eve, sitting in the small church in Dalhart, Yates reached for her hand. "I love you," he whispered. "I know I have not said it before, but I do. I love you." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. I have for months. When I finish school, when I can offer you a real future, I want to marry you. I want us to build a life together, whatever that looks like." His grip on her hand tightened. "Will you wait for me? Will you let me come back and make this real?" "Yes. Yes to all of it." The 3 years that followed were hard but good. Yates buried himself in his studies, graduating near the top of his class. Helena built her reputation steadily, becoming known throughout the Texas Panhandle as the portrait artist to hire. She saved her money carefully, invested in better supplies, even took a trip to Santa Fe to study with an older artist who taught her new techniques with oil paints. They saw each other during breaks and holidays, their reunions intense and precious. They wrote constantly, their letters growing deeper and more intimate as the months passed. They planned their future in careful detail. Yates would open a law practice. Helena would maintain her portrait business. They would build something together that honored both their dreams. In the spring of 1887, Yates graduated from law school. He passed the bar examination on his first attempt and immediately returned to Dalhart. Helena met him at the stage-coach station, her heart racing. "I am officially a lawyer," he announced, sweeping her into his arms. "Yates Lawson, attorney at law. I am so proud of you. And I have something for you." He set her down and pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know we already talked about this, but I wanted to do it properly." He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty street, and Helena felt time stop. "Helena Everett, you are the bravest, most talented, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You waited for me when you could have had anyone. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams the way you supported mine?" "Yes." Helena laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring was simple, a single small diamond that Yates had saved for months to afford. It fit perfectly. They were married in June in the small church in Dalhart, with Catherine Garrett and her family in attendance along with Mrs. Patterson, Ruth, and what seemed like half the town. Helena wore a dress Catherine had helped her buy in Dallas, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Yates wore a new suit, looking every inch the lawyer he had become. "You are sure about this?" Yates asked as they stood at the altar, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Marrying a lawyer who is about to start from nothing, who cannot offer you much beyond hard work and devotion." "I am marrying my partner," Helena whispered back. "My best friend, the man who saw me when I was invisible and helped me become visible. I have never been more sure of anything." They moved into a small house in Dalhart, 2 rooms and a kitchen that felt like a palace after years of boarding houses and temporary quarters. Yates hung a sign outside. "Yates Lawson, attorney at law." Helena converted one room into a studio with north-facing windows and proper lighting. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, learning to live together, to balance work and relationship, to build the partnership they had envisioned. There were fights, mostly about money and time and the stress of starting 2 careers simultaneously. But there was also deep joy, coming home to each other every night, sharing meals and dreams and the small intimacies of daily life. Yates's law practice grew slowly but steadily. He took cases the bigger lawyers in Dallas, would not bother with. Land disputes for small ranchers, wills for farmers, representation for people who could not afford expensive attorneys. His fees were modest but fair, and his reputation for honesty and hard work spread. Helena continued her portrait work, but she also began branching out. She painted landscapes of the prairie, working to capture the spare beauty of the plains. She illustrated children's books for a publisher in Austin. She taught drawing classes to anyone who wanted to learn, charging what students could afford. 2 years after their marriage, Helena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. "What if I cannot work?" she asked Yates that night. "What if having a baby means giving up everything I have built?" "It will not. We will find a way." He pulled her close. "Plenty of women manage both family and work. You are the most determined person I know. If anyone can do this, it is you." Their son was born in March of 1890, a healthy baby with Yates's gray eyes and Helena's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Yates's father. Motherhood was harder than Helena had expected, but also more rewarding. She learned to work during Samuel's naps, to sketch with one hand while holding him with the other. Catherine Garrett helped arrange for Maria's sister to come help a few days a week, giving Helena time to focus on commissions. "You do not have to do this," Yates told her more than once. "I am making enough now that you could take a break if you wanted." "I do not want a break, I want my work." Helena looked up from the portrait she was sketching. "Being a mother is wonderful, but it is not all I am. I am also an artist. I need both." "Then you will have both, whatever it takes." As Samuel grew, the house filled with his energy and chaos. Helena's studio became a shared space, with Samuel's toys scattered among her supplies, his childish drawings pinned up beside her careful portraits. She taught him to draw almost as soon as he could hold a pencil, delighting in his uninhibited creativity. Yates's practice continued to grow. He took on a junior partner, a young lawyer fresh from school who reminded Yates of himself years ago, hungry and brilliant and poor. Together they built a reputation for taking on cases that mattered, fighting for people who needed advocates. In 1893, their daughter was born, a tiny thing they named Caroline after Yates's mother. With 2 children, the small house became almost impossibly cramped. They talked about moving, maybe to a bigger town, somewhere with more opportunities. "What do you want?" Yates asked Helena one evening as they sat on their front porch, watching Samuel chase fireflies in the yard while Caroline slept in her mother's arms. "I want this. Exactly this." Helena leaned against his shoulder. "I know it is cramped and chaotic and sometimes overwhelming, but this is what I always wanted without knowing it. Work that matters, a family I love, a partner who understands me. No regrets about leaving Boston, about the life you might have had if you stayed." "Not for a moment. That life would not have included you or these babies or the work I do now. I would not trade this for anything." She looked up at him. "What about you? Any regrets?" "Only that I did not find you sooner." Yates kissed her forehead. "But maybe we found each other exactly when we were supposed to." They did eventually move to a larger house on the edge of town, with enough room for both Helena's studio and Yates's home office. Samuel started school, showing his mother's artistic talent and his father's logical mind. Caroline grew into a talkative, curious child who loved following her mother around the studio, asking endless questions about colors and techniques. The years flowed past, marked by small triumphs and ordinary joys. Helena's reputation grew beyond Texas, with commissions coming from as far as New Orleans and St. Louis. She had a show in Dallas that sold out completely, the first time her work had been displayed in a proper gallery. Yates was elected county judge, a position that let him apply his legal knowledge to helping his community. In 1899, on a warm spring evening, they sat together on their porch as they had countless times before. Samuel was 14 now, already taller than his mother. Caroline was 6, gap-toothed and laughing. A third child, 3-year-old Henry, played in the yard under his siblings' watchful eyes. "You remember the day we met?" Yates asked, his hand finding Helena's as naturally as breathing. "You were sitting in the dust with your sign, looking so determined. I remember thinking you were probably going to walk past like everyone else. Then you stopped, and everything changed." Helena smiled. "You gave me $1 for a 15-cent portrait and changed my entire life." "I gave you nothing you had not earned. I just helped people see what was already there. We helped each other see." Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play in the fading light. "That is what love is, I think. Helping each other see who we really are and who we can become. Then I am the luckiest man in Texas." Yates pulled her closer. "Because you have shown me more than I ever thought possible." As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples just as it had that first evening they walked together, Helena thought about the girl she had been 14 years ago. Alone, nearly broke, desperate and determined, sketching portraits for pennies in the dust. That girl had dreamed of being seen, of being valued for her talent. She had gotten that, but she had also gotten so much more. A true partner, a family, a life built on mutual respect and shared dreams. The frame Yates had commissioned all those years ago still hung in their parlor, holding that first portrait. Helena had offered many times to do a new one, something more polished and refined, but Yates always refused. "That one is perfect," he would say. "It reminds me of the moment I knew my life was about to change." Now, sitting in the warm evening air with her husband beside her and their children's laughter filling the yard, Helena understood what he meant. That portrait represented more than just a moment. It represented a choice, his choice to see her worth and her choice to believe him. It represented the beginning of everything they had built together. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, squeezing her hand. "How grateful I am. For you, for this life, for everything." Helena looked up at him, seeing the gray eyes that still made her heart race after all these years. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, the years apart, the struggles, especially not those. They made this sweeter." She kissed him gently. "Besides, what is art without struggle? What is love without challenge? The easy things are pretty, but the difficult things are beautiful," spoken like a true artist. "And lawyer's wife." Helena laughed. "Do not forget that part." As darkness fell and they called the children inside for dinner, Helena took one last look at the prairie stretching endlessly beyond their home. She had come to Texas looking for opportunity, for a chance to prove her talent. She had found that, but she had also found something infinitely more valuable. A life that honored all the parts of herself, artist and wife and mother and friend. A partner who understood that supporting her dreams was not about grand gestures but daily choices, making space for her work, believing in her talent, sharing the load so she could be everything she wanted to be. The next morning, Helena woke early as she always did, before the household stirred. She made coffee and went to her studio, settling in front of a new commission. But first, as she had every morning for years, she spent a few minutes sketching for herself. This morning she drew Yates asleep in their bed, peaceful and still, the early light soft on his face. These sketches were never for sale or display. They were her way of holding on to moments, of capturing the life they had built together. By the time Yates appeared in her studio doorway with a fresh cup of coffee, she had the basic outline complete. "Drawing me again?" he asked, setting the cup beside her. "Always. You are my favorite subject." Even after all these years, especially after all these years, I know your face better than my own now. Every line, every expression, I could draw you in my sleep." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you for this. Thank you for you." Yates kissed the top of her head. "I have to go into the office early today. Judge Thompson wants to discuss the Harrison case. Will you be all right with the children? Maria is coming at 8 to help. We will be fine. Go do important lawyer things." After he left, Helena returned to her work. The commission was a portrait of a family, parents and 5 children, complex and time-consuming but well-paid. She had learned over the years to balance the commercial work that paid the bills with the personal work that fed her soul. The family portraits and landscapes bought their house and fed their children. The private sketches and experimental paintings kept her sane and growing as an artist. Samuel wandered in around 7, still half asleep. At 14, he was at that awkward age, all gangly limbs and changing voice. He had started asking about his own future lately, whether he should pursue art or law or something else entirely. "Can I watch you work?" he asked, settling into the chair by the window. "Of course. Want to try sketching with me?" They worked in comfortable silence for an hour, mother and son, both absorbed in the act of creation. Helena felt a deep contentment watching him work. He had talent, real talent, though whether he would pursue it seriously remained to be seen. Either way, she was glad he had this skill, this way of seeing and interpreting the world. "Mom," Samuel said eventually, not looking up from his sketch, "how did you know you wanted to be an artist?" "Like really know," Helena considered the question. "I think I always knew in some way. Drawing was the only thing that made complete sense to me. But knowing and actually doing are different things. Actually becoming an artist took courage I had to find along the way." "Were you scared when you came to Texas alone?" "Terrified. I was almost out of money in a strange place, trying to do something people told me was impossible." Helena added shading to her sketch. "But I was more scared of not trying, of getting to the end of my life and wondering what might have been if I had been braver." "Is that why you still work?" "Even though Dad makes enough money now that you could stop if you wanted, I work because I love it, because being an artist is part of who I am, not just what I do." She looked at her son directly. "That is what I hope you find, Samuel. Not necessarily art or law, but something that is so much a part of you that not doing it feels impossible." He nodded slowly, processing this. "I think I might want to be a teacher." "Is that strange?" "Not strange at all. Teaching is noble work. But I am good at drawing like you. And I could probably do law like Dad. Teaching does not seem as impressive." Helena set down her pencil and turned to face him fully. "Listen to me. The most impressive thing you can do is figure out what you love and then do it with your whole heart. Whether that is art or law or teaching or ranching or anything else. Do not choose based on what seems impressive to other people. Choose based on what feels true to you. Even if it is hard, especially if it is hard. The things worth doing usually are." That conversation stayed with Helena throughout the day. She thought about the choices she had made, the risks she had taken, the life she had built. Nothing had been easy, but all of it had been worth it. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner as they did every night Yates was not working late. This was Helena's favorite time of day, all of them together, sharing food and stories and laughter. Samuel talked about his day at school. Caroline recited a poem she had learned. Henry mostly threw food and made everyone laugh. After the children were in bed, Helena and Yates sat together in the parlor. He read through case files while she sketched, the domestic silence comfortable and familiar. "Samuel asked me today how I knew I wanted to be an artist," Helena said without looking up from her work. "What did you tell him?" "That it was part of who I am, that I was more afraid of not trying than of failing. Yates set aside his papers. He has been asking me similar questions. About law school, about starting my practice. I think he is trying to figure out his own path. He mentioned teaching. He seemed worried it was not impressive enough. Teaching, Yates smiled. He would be wonderful at that. He has your patience and my love of explaining things. That is what I told him, but I think he is worried about disappointing us. Then we need to make sure he knows that is impossible. The only way he could disappoint us is by not being true to himself. Yates moved to sit beside Helena on the sofa. We are lucky, you know. We both got to chase our dreams and catch them. Not everyone gets that. We are lucky, but we also worked for it. There is a difference between luck and earned success. Fair point. Yates put his arm around her shoulders. Have I told you lately how much I admire you? Not in at least 3 or 4 hours. Helena set aside her sketchbook and leaned into him. I am grievously neglected. Then let me remedy that. He kissed her softly. I admire your talent, your dedication, your refusal to give up on yourself even when it would have been easier. I admire the mother you are, the way you balance your work and our family without sacrificing either. I admire your kindness and your strength, and the way you still look at me like I am someone special even after seeing me at my worst. You are someone special. Helena touched his face gently. You are the man who saw me when I was invisible, who believed in me when I did not quite believe in myself, who has spent 14 years proving every single day that you meant your marriage vows. It has not always been easy. No, but it has always been worth it. They sat together in the quiet house, holding each other, grateful for what they had built. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass, the same endless sound that had greeted Helena when she first arrived in Dalhart all those years ago. But she was not that frightened girl anymore. She was a woman who had claimed her dreams and built a life on her own terms. She was an artist, a wife, a mother, a friend. She was seen and valued and loved, and she was home. The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Samuel did become a teacher, eventually running the school in Dalhart and earning a reputation for patience and innovation. Caroline showed talent for both art and music, eventually moving to Dallas to study at a conservatory. Henry, their youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a rancher, buying land near the old Triple L, and raising cattle with the same dedication his parents had brought to their own work. Helena and Yates grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing but their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated 20 years of marriage, then 30. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation. Through it all, Helena continued to paint and Yates continued to practice law, both of them working well into their 60s because the work still mattered, still brought them joy. One evening in 1910, they sat on their porch as the sun set, just as they had countless times before. They were both in their late 50s now, marked by time but still vital, still engaged with life. You remember when I told you I wanted to marry you? Yates asked, his hand finding hers automatically. In the church on Christmas Eve all those years ago, of course. You said you wanted to build a life together, whatever that looked like. I had no idea what it would actually look like. I just knew I wanted it to include you. He squeezed her hand. This life we have built, with the children and the grandchildren and the work we both still love, it is more than I imagined that day, better than I knew to hope for. Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, looking out at the prairie that had become home. I was sitting in the dust with my 5-cent sign when you found me. I thought if I could just make enough money to survive, that would be success. I did not know to dream bigger than that. We dreamed bigger together. That is the magic of it. The magic is that you helped me see myself clearly. You framed my talent, literally and figuratively. You showed me I was worth more than 5 cents and pencil sketches in the dust." Helena turned to look at him, seeing the same gray eyes that had captured her attention almost 30 years ago. "You changed my life, Yates Lawson. We changed each other's lives. That is what love does." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. An artist and a lawyer, a dreamer and a believer, partners in every sense of the word. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, visiting for the weekend. The sound of young voices and laughter filled the air, the next chapter of the story they had begun all those years ago in the dust of Dalhart. Helena picked up the sketchbook she always kept nearby and began to draw in the fading light. She sketched their joined hands, weathered by time but still strong, still connected. She sketched the porch railing and the prairie beyond and the first stars appearing overhead. These moments, these quiet evenings of accumulated love and shared history, were her favorite things to capture. Not grand gestures or dramatic scenes, but the simple beauty of a life well lived together. When it grew too dark to see clearly, she set aside her pencil and simply sat with her husband, watching the night settle over the land they both loved. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, new joys. Their children would visit with their families. Helena would finish a commission she was working on. Yates would review briefs for an upcoming case. Life would continue in its beautiful, ordinary way. But tonight, they simply sat together in the darkness, grateful for everything they had found in each other, for the dreams they had chased and caught, for the life they had built from dust and determination and love. "Thank you," Helena whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Yates asked. "For stopping that day, for seeing me, for all of it. Thank you for being worth seeing, for being brave enough to sit in the dust with your sign, for believing me when I said your work was worth more than 5 cents. He pulled her closer. "For choosing me, choosing this life, choosing us. I would choose it again. Every time, in every version of the world, I would choose this, choose you." And as the prairie wind whispered around them and the stars wheeled overhead, they sat together in perfect contentment. Two souls who had found each other in the dust and built a love that would last all their remaining days. The cowboy who had commissioned a portrait and framed her talent, and the artist who had shown him his own worth. Together, they had created something far more beautiful than any portrait could capture. A life of shared dreams, mutual respect, and love that deepened with every passing year. Their story was not one of grand adventure or dramatic rescue. It was simpler and more profound than that. It was the story of two people who saw each other truly, who chose each other daily, who built something real and lasting from nothing more than hope and hard work, and an unwavering belief that the other person was worth the effort. And it was a story with a happy ending, though not an ending at all really, just a continuation. Their love would outlast them in their children and grandchildren, in the portraits Helena painted and the cases Yates won, in the lives they touched and the example they set. They had started with 5 cents and a portrait sketch, and they had built an empire of love and mutual respect that would endure long after they were gone. As they finally rose to go inside, Yates held the door for Helena, and she paused to kiss him in the doorway. "I love you," she said, as she had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. "I love you too," he replied, as constant and true as the prairie wind. "Always have, always will." And then they went inside together, closing the door on another perfect day in their imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life.